Hi, today we're at HARS, the Historical Aircraft Restoration Society at Albion Park, just south of Sydney. It has an excellent range of both military and civil aircraft, and we're going to check it out. And clearly they have a sense of humour. Cafe Connie, arriving 9:30, departing at 2. The museum has a couple of hangars full of older aircraft and various aviation-related themes. And in the reception area we have a Huey Cobra gunship. Australia used the Huey Cobra extensively in Vietnam, but this particular model postdates that. I think this model's from 1988 or sometime around then. The ordnance is certainly post-Vietnam War period. And this is a Turana target drone. It's not a missile, it's a target drone. You can tell by the high visibility. In addition to the complete aircraft, there's a number of engines on display, including the legendary Rolls-Royce Merlin V12 with a capacity of 27 litres. Imagine the horsepower this thing puts out. Okay, let's go outside and have a look at the largest display, a 747-400. You'll hear it referred to by the staff here as OJA, because its registration number is VHOJA. I love the 747 because it really enabled travel from Australia globally, and I've travelled on them for a long, long time. I think the 747-100 or 200 was my first one. This is the 400, and I've gone a lot of places on these things. And I don't think I'm alone. I think a lot of Australians have flown overseas on a 747 and seen the world. This example, VHOJA, or OJA as the staff call it, is also known as the City of Canberra. So this particular model seats upward of 450 passengers in a 3-class configuration, which was the way that Qantas configured most of their 747s. It has a very large economy section, a business class upstairs, and the first class at the pointy bit. These really were a marvel of engineering. So let's go have a look inside. So the ultimate journey on one of these was Sydney to London, which was about 24 hours elapsed time. There was no TV. There were 400 people in economy. I think by the time the 747-400 came out, there was no smoking. On the earlier ones there were, down at these back seats. But it was quite a trip. As you can see, 343 was the pattern. So 10 people across and 40 odd rows in economy. The 747-400 had a 2-man crew on each shift, I should add. The flight engineer was removed for the 400. Behind the crew cockpit, upstairs was business class, not first class, that was downstairs. I'm not sure this first class would count as first class anymore. More like a business class seat these days, but this was first class. So all in all, a truly magnificent machine. Anyway, let's go inside and have a look at some of the other aircraft. So here we have VHTAA, which is a Convair 440, and also the pride of the museum, which is a flying constellation known as Connie. This plane is fully functional and regularly does trips around Sydney, and I believe one of the only flying constellations anywhere. Also here we have some military aircraft, a Mirage, and I believe that's a Vampire. So this Convair 440 was originally a South African plane and was owned by a company called Rovos Rail. It was a super luxury airliner and used to ferry rail passengers around. I don't think there was anything this luxurious ever operating on Australian domestic routes. So the cockpit is very 1950s, lots of instruments. I think over the years these have been greatly simplified, but a huge amount of instrumentation here. I believe this aircraft had a crew of 3, the pilot and co-pilot, and the flight engineer to look after all the engines and everything. The F-111C was a key part of Australia's defence strategy for many, many years. It was a supersonic attack aircraft known as a penetrator. We asked the guide what the little pig was for, and he wasn't forthcoming. I don't know whether he knew or not, but let me tell you. So the F-111 was known as the aardvark. The South Africans called an aardvark a bush pig, and hence it was also known as the pig. Not a flattering name, but this was quite an incredible aircraft. Swing wing, supersonic, flying just a few metres above the ground. Pilot and co-pilot in a side-by-side configuration. So now we have the pride of the museum, Connie, the Super Constellation, a flying aircraft, regularly flies around Sydney, and just a beautiful machine. This is the only currently flying Super Constellation. I believe there is one other under renovation. This was a US military jet. It wasn't originally a Qantas jet, but it was restored with the assistance of Qantas. The museum does have a DVD for sale, which details the whole renovation process and how this particular jet was brought back from Tucson, Arizona. The Super Constellation is important in Australian aviation history because these were the planes used by Qantas on Trans-Pacific routes after 1954 and before the start of jet services across the Pacific. The Super Constellations were eventually replaced with Boeing 707s on the same route, and that halved the flying time between Australia and the United States. Okay, let's go have a look at the other hangar on the other side of the museum. First up we have the CAC F-86 Sabre, which was an Australian-produced F-86. It had an uprated engine from the US model. There's an interesting YouTube video on it. There's also some MiG-15s here and some Catalina flying boats. These magnificent boats were used extensively around the Pacific. But do believe that this one is capable of flying once the restoration is finished. The museum has a couple of de Havilland Caribou. These were military short takeoff and landing transport aircraft and were used extensively from mostly in the 1960s and 70s by Australian Defence Forces. This Caribou that you see here was very famous because it was the last Australian aircraft out of Vietnam at the end of the Vietnam War. And this is the other aircraft, A4-210. Both these aircraft are fully serviceable and regularly fly around the area. They were only retired in 2009. This next aircraft used to fly as well. It's a replica of the Southern Cross, which I guess needs no introduction for Australians, which used to be flown by Sir Charles Kingsford Smith. Kingsford Smith, of course, is famous for completing the first Trans-Pacific flight. This aircraft, the replica, crashed on landing a couple of years ago and is currently being restored. So this museum is wonderful for aviation geeks And if you're visiting Australia or New South Wales, you can catch the train here from Sydney straight to the museum. Just get off at Albion Park Station and you'll be right there. I'd appreciate if you subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell if you would like to be notified of our upcoming content. It really helps me out. Thanks a lot.